The IV drip felt cold against my arm as I lay in the hospital bed, staring at the white ceiling tiles I'd memorized over the past 3 days. My husband Marcus sat beside me, his hand supposedly offering comfort, but all I could focus on was the guilt flickering across his face. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Said, tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The surgery went well, Claire, Dr. Harrison said, avoiding my eyes. You'll need to rest for a few weeks. What he didn't say was that I'd never have children. What Marcus didn't know was that I remembered everything now, including my past life, and exactly why I was here. The memories hit me like a freight train the moment I opened my eyes after the anesthesia wore off. Not just from this life, but from before 28 years that I'd lived once already, ending in betrayal and death at the hands of the man now holding my hand. In my previous life, I was Claire Thompson, married to Marcus Blackwell for 5 years before discovering his affair with Victoria Sterling, his childhood friend and business partner. I died in a car accident that wasn't an accident at all. Marcus had tampered with my brakes after I threatened to expose his embezzlement of company funds to support Victoria's failing art gallery. But somehow I was back. Same body, same husband, same life, except this time, I was 23 again, and I knew exactly what was coming. How are you feeling, sweetheart? Marcus asked, his voice dripping with fake concern. I studied his face, the sharp jawline that used to make my heart race, the blue eyes that once looked at me with genuine love, before Victoria came back into his life. Now I could see through his mask completely. Tired, I whispered, playing the role of the devoted wife recovering from what he believed was emergency surgery for a burst appendix. But I knew the truth. Dr. Harrison, Marcus's old college roommate, had performed a hysterectomy on me under false pretenses. In my past life, I'd discovered this betrayal too late, after years of failed fertility treatments, wondering why I couldn't conceive. This time, I'd woken up during the procedure and heard their conversation through the anesthesia haze. She can never find out, Marcus had said. Victoria's pregnant, and if Claire gets pregnant too, it'll complicate everything. This way, Victoria's child will be my only heir. Dr. Harrison had hesitated. Marcus, this is illegal. If she ever finds out, she won't. You'll tell her there were complications, some condition that required emergency intervention. She trusts you. They were right about one thing. The old Claire would have trusted them blindly. But I wasn't the old Claire anymore. Over the next few days, I played the perfect patient while Marcus visited, bringing flowers and making small talk about his work at Blackwell Industries, the family company his father had built from nothing. He'd inherited it when his parents died in a plane crash 3 years ago, and I'd stood by his side as he grieved, never knowing he was already planning my destruction. Victoria stopped by the office today, he mentioned casually on day 4, watching for my reaction. She asked about you. Victoria Sterling, tall, elegant, with the kind of effortless beauty that made other women feel invisible. She'd been Marcus's first love in high school, before her family moved to Paris for her father's diplomatic career. When she returned to Seattle 2 years ago, claiming she wanted to reconnect with old friends, I welcomed her with open arms. What a fool I'd been. That's sweet of her, I said, forcing a smile. I should call her when I get home. Marcus relaxed slightly. He had no idea that I knew about their secret apartment downtown, their weekend trips disguised as business meetings, or the fact that Victoria was already 3 months pregnant with his child. When I was finally discharged, Marcus helped me into his black BMW, the same car he'd used to kill me in 18 months, if I let history repeat itself. But I wouldn't. This time, I held all the cards. Our house in Bellevue looked the same as I remembered. Modern, expensive, cold. Marcus had bought it to impress his business associates, caring more about the marble countertops and floor-to-ceiling windows than creating a warm home. I'd spent countless hours in my previous life trying to make it feel welcoming, never realizing he was planning to replace me with someone who already fit his vision of the perfect wife. I'll work from home this week to take care of you, Marcus announced, setting my bags down in the foyer. That's not necessary, I replied quickly. The last thing I needed was him hovering while I put my plan into motion. I know how important the Morrison deal is. I'll be fine resting. He looked relieved. The Morrison deal, a $50 million development project that would make or break his company's expansion into commercial real estate. In my past life, he'd won it, using the success to leave me for Victoria and start their new life together. This time would be different. That evening, while Marcus thought I was sleeping, I heard him on the phone in his study. "It's done," he said quietly. "Dr. Harrison says she'll never be able to have children now. I know it seems cruel, but it's for the best. Your baby will be my only child, the sole heir to everything. Yes, I'll tell her soon. After she's recovered, I'll suggest we start trying for kids. When nothing happens, we'll go through the motions of fertility treatments. She'll blame herself, never suspecting the truth." Pressed my ear closer to the door. "Victoria, you have to trust me. Once the Morrison deal closes, I'll have enough money to divorce her cleanly. We'll say we grew apart, that the stress of infertility destroyed our marriage. She'll get a settlement, but nothing that threatens our future. Our child will inherit everything, just like we planned." After he hung up, I slipped back to bed, my mind racing. They'd thought of everything, or so they believed, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They assumed I was still the naive, trusting woman who'd married Marcus 5 years ago. The next morning, I waited until Marcus left for the office before making my first move. I called my old college friend Jessica Palmer, now one of Seattle's top family lawyers. "Claire, I heard you were in the hospital. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Jess, but I need your help with something confidential. Can we meet?" An hour later, I sat across from Jessica in her downtown office, the Space Needle visible through her window. She'd always been sharp, the kind of person who saw through people's facades instantly. "I need you to help me gather evidence," I said, without preamble. "My husband is having an affair, and I think he's stealing from his company." Jessica raised an eyebrow. "That's quite an accusation. What makes you think?" "I have my reasons. Can you recommend a private investigator, someone discreet?" She studied me carefully. Something in my expression must have convinced her, because she nodded and pulled out her phone. "Daniel Cross. He's expensive but worth every penny. Tell him I sent you." By that afternoon, I'd hired Daniel and given him everything I remembered from my past life. The apartment Marcus rented under a false name, Victoria's pregnancy, the offshore accounts where he'd been hiding money. Daniel was a former FBI agent in his 50s, with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "This is very specific information," he noted, looking up from his notes. "How did you come by it?" "Let's just say I have very good instincts about people," I replied. "How long will this take?" "If what you're telling me is accurate, I should have preliminary evidence within a week. But Mrs. Blackwell, if these allegations are true, your husband is looking at serious criminal charges." "Good," I said, surprising us both with the venom in my voice. "He deserves everything that's coming to him." That evening, Marcus came home with takeout from my favorite restaurant, playing the caring husband role perfectly. "How was your day?" he asked, sitting beside me on the couch. "Quiet. I spent most of it resting, like the doctor ordered." I paused, then delivered my first test. "I've been thinking about what Dr. Harrison said about my surgery. The complications he mentioned, will they affect our ability to have children?" Marcus's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "We don't need to worry about that right now. You need to focus on healing. But eventually, we'll want to start a family, right? We've talked about it so many times." His discomfort was palpable. "Of course, when you're ready, we'll start trying. And if there are any issues, we'll deal with them together." The lies rolled off his tongue so easily. In my previous life, I'd interpreted his evasiveness as consideration for my health. Now I recognized it for what it was: calculated manipulation. Over the next few days, I played the role of the recovering wife, while secretly meeting with Daniel and Jessica. The evidence was mounting faster than I'd expected. Daniel had confirmed the apartment, photographed Marcus entering and leaving with Victoria, and uncovered financial irregularities at Blackwell Industries that went back 2 years. "Your husband has been siphoning money from company accounts," Daniel reported during our third meeting. "Small amounts at first, but it escalated. We're talking about nearly $2 million funneled into accounts linked to Victoria Sterling's art gallery and personal expenses." "Can you prove it?" "With time, yes. But I need access to more records. Is there any way you could get me into his home office?" A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. I smiled for the first time since my rebirth. I think I can arrange that. That Friday evening, Marcus announced he had to work late on the Morrison presentation. I might not be home until after midnight, he said, kissing my forehead with lips that had kissed Victoria that very afternoon. Don't wait up. As soon as his car left the driveway, I called Daniel. Within an hour, he was in Marcus's study, photographing documents and copying files from his computer. I stood guard by the window, watching for any sign of Marcus's return. This is a gold mine, Daniel muttered, scrolling through Marcus's emails. He's been planning this for over a year. Look at this. He actually wrote to Victoria about making you infertile. I leaned over his shoulder to read the email dated just 2 weeks before my surgery. Dr. Harrison agreed to the procedure. Claire will never suspect, and will be free to build our family without complications. After the Morrison deal, we'll have everything we need for a fresh start. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Even knowing what they'd done, seeing it in writing felt like a physical blow. There's more, Daniel continued. He's been pricing divorce lawyers, looking into ways to minimize your settlement. And look at this, he's already put a down payment on a house in Victoria's name. By the time Daniel finished, we had enough evidence to destroy Marcus's life 10 times over. Financial fraud, medical malpractice conspiracy, adultery, the list went on. What's your next move? Daniel asked as he packed up his equipment. I stared out the window at the life Marcus thought he was stealing from me. The house, the cars, the future he'd planned with another woman, while mutilating my body to ensure I could never compete. Now, I said quietly, I become someone he never saw coming. 3 weeks after my surgery, I was ready to execute the first phase of my revenge. Marcus had grown comfortable, believing his secret was safe, his plan proceeding perfectly. He'd even started bringing up children more frequently, feigning excitement about our future family, while knowing it was impossible. But I had advantages he couldn't imagine. I'm feeling much better, I announced over breakfast that Tuesday morning. I think I'm ready to get back to work. Marcus looked up from his phone, where he'd been texting Victoria. Are you sure Dr. Harrison said to take it slow? I've been thinking about our conversation regarding starting a family. Maybe we should begin trying soon? I watched his face carefully as I delivered this calculated blow. The coffee mug trembled slightly in his hand. That's wonderful, Claire. But maybe we should wait until you're completely healed? Why wait? We're not getting any younger, and I've always dreamed of being a mother. Each word was chosen to twist the knife deeper. In fact, I already stopped taking my birth control. Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. The irony was perfect. He was panicking about a pregnancy that could never happen because of what he'd done to me. I should get to the office, he said abruptly, grabbing his briefcase. The Morrison presentation is tomorrow. After he left, I made my first real move. Using my key to Blackwell Industries, which Marcus had never thought to revoke, I walked into the building where I'd once worked as his marketing director before he convinced me to quit and focus on being a wife. Mrs. Blackwell, Sandra Martinez, the receptionist, looked surprised. I didn't know you were coming in today. Just picking up some old files, I said with a bright smile. Marcus asked me to grab them while I was out running errands. The beauty of being the CEO's wife was that no one questioned my presence. I rode the elevator to the 15th floor, past the office that had once been mine, to Marcus's corner suite. His assistant, Rachel, wasn't at her desk, probably at lunch. Perfect timing. Using the access codes I remembered from my previous life, I logged into Marcus's computer and began downloading everything Daniel hadn't been able to access from home. Bank records, client communications, board meeting minutes, years of evidence that would expose not just his affair and theft, but his complete betrayal of his father's legacy. While the files transferred to my encrypted drive, I placed a small recording device, courtesy of Daniel, under Marcus's desk. If he was going to discuss strategy with Victoria or Dr. Harrison, I wanted to hear every word. Claire. I spun around to find James Morrison himself standing in the doorway. The Morrison deal, the contract worth $50 million that Marcus was presenting tomorrow. Mr. Morrison, I said smoothly, slipping the drive into my purse. What a pleasant surprise. James Morrison was in his 60s, a shrewd businessman who'd built his empire through careful partnerships and even more careful background checks. In my previous life, he'd awarded the contract to Marcus, impressed by his presentation and financial stability. This time, I had different plans. I was just leaving Marcus a note, I continued. We're so excited about tomorrow's presentation. Actually, I'm glad I ran into you, Morrison said, stepping into the office. I've been meaning to ask, how has Marcus been handling the expansion into commercial development? It's a big leap from residential projects. An opening. In my past life, I'd been too naive to recognize the subtle probing for what it was. Morrison testing the waters, looking for any red flags before committing his money. To be honest, Mr. Morrison, I've been a little concerned, I said, injecting just the right amount of worry into my voice. Marcus has been under tremendous stress lately, working late, taking calls at all hours. I worry he's overextending himself. Morrison's eyes sharpened. Oh, in what way? Well, I probably shouldn't say this, but I've noticed some irregularities in his behavior. Secretive about finances, making decisions without consulting his usual advisors. Between you and me, I think he might be in over his head with this expansion. It was a delicate balance, plant seeds of doubt without appearing to actively sabotage my own husband. Morrison was too smart to fall for anything heavy-handed. I see, he said, thoughtfully. That's concerning. A project of this magnitude requires stability and transparency. Of course, I'm sure it's nothing serious. I backtracked. Just pre-presentation nerves, probably. But I could see the wheels turning in Morrison's head. By the time I left the building, I knew he'd be conducting his own investigation into Blackwell Industries' financial stability. That evening, Marcus came home agitated, pacing the living room with his phone pressed to his ear. I don't care what you have to do, he was saying to someone. Those accounts need to be balanced before tomorrow morning. Morrison's people are asking questions. I pretended to be reading in the kitchen, but I could hear every word. Panic was setting in, exactly what I'd hoped for. No, Victoria, you can't come to the presentation, he continued. It's too risky. What do you mean? Claire was asking about children again. I told you that's handled. Fine, we'll discuss it after the deal closes. When he hung up, I wandered into the living room with a cup of tea. Everything okay?
You seem stressed.
Marcus forced a smile.
Just work.
Big day tomorrow.
I'm so proud of you,
I said, settling beside him on the couch. Your father would be amazed at how you've grown the company. The mention of his father, who'd built Blackwell Industries on principles of honesty and integrity, made Marcus flinch. Good. I wanted him to think about the legacy he was destroying. Actually, I continued, I was thinking about attending the presentation tomorrow. I know you usually prefer to handle business alone, but this is such a milestone. I'd love to be there to support you. That's not necessary, Marcus said quickly. It'll be boring, just numbers and projections. But I want to celebrate with you afterward. We could invite some people over. Maybe Victoria. I feel like I will never see her anymore. Marcus went pale. The last thing he wanted was me and his pregnant mistress in the same room. She's been busy with the gallery, he said weakly. Right, of course. How is that going, by the way? I remember she was having some financial troubles when she first came back to Seattle. Another direct hit. Marcus knew I had no reason to suspect the gallery was being funded with stolen money, but my casual mention of Victoria's finances clearly rattled him. I think she's doing better now, he muttered. The next morning I woke early and dressed carefully, professional but approving, the supportive wife attending her husband's triumph. Marcus tried one last time to dissuade me from coming. Are you sure you're feeling up to it? Dr. Harrison said to avoid stress. What could be less stressful than watching my brilliant husband close the biggest deal in company history? I smiled sweetly. Besides, I already called Rachel and told her I'd be attending. Marcus looked trapped. Canceling my attendance now would raise questions he couldn't answer. The presentation was held in Blackwell Industries' main conference room. Morrison arrived with his team of lawyers and accountants, all serious expressions and expensive suits. I took a seat in the back, playing the proud wife while secretly recording everything on my phone. Marcus began confidently, outlining his vision for the waterfront development project. His presentation was polished, professional, He'd always been good at his job when he wasn't busy embezzling from it. But halfway through, Morrison interrupted. Mr. Blackwell, before we proceed, I need to address some concerns that have come to my attention regarding your company's financial stability. The color drained from Marcus's face. I'm sorry. Morrison's lead accountant opened a folder. Our preliminary audit has revealed several irregularities in your recent financial statements. Unexplained transfers, questionable expenditures, discrepancies in your reported assets. I watched Marcus struggle to maintain his composure while his world crumbled around him. This was even better than I'd hoped. Morrison had moved faster than expected. I can explain any discrepancies, Marcus said, his voice tight. Perhaps we could schedule a follow-up meeting to review. I'm afraid that won't be necessary, Morrison said, standing. We've decided to award the contract to Henderson Development. They demonstrated the financial transparency and stability we require for a project of this magnitude. Henderson Development, Marcus's biggest competitor. In my previous life, they'd lost the bid by a narrow margin. This time, with Morrison's faith in Marcus shaken, they'd swooped in and claimed the prize. After Morrison and his team left, Marcus stood alone in the conference room, staring at the presentation materials scattered across the table. $50 million, gone. His company's future, destroyed. His plan to leave me for Victoria, suddenly impossible without the financial security he'd counted on. I approached slowly, playing the concerned wife. Marcus, what happened? I don't understand. He looked at me with wild eyes. Someone's been investigating us. Someone knows about the transfers. What transfers? Marcus, you're scaring me. For a moment I thought he might confess everything. The stolen money, the affair, the surgery, all of it could come spilling out in his panic. Instead, he grabbed his phone and dialed a number. We have a problem, he said as soon as the call connected. Morrison knows about the money. We need to move our timeline up. Tonight. Yes, tonight. As he talked, I realized he wasn't calling Victoria. The voice on the other end was male, older, someone I hadn't expected to be involved in this conspiracy. Dr. Harrison will handle his end, Marcus continued. But we need to make sure there are no loose ends, no witnesses who could tie us to any of this. My blood ran cold. In my previous life, Marcus had killed me to keep me quiet about his crimes. This time, with his back against the wall, and his timeline accelerated, he was moving to eliminate threats earlier than planned. But there was one crucial difference. This time, I knew it was coming. That evening I packed a small bag and left it hidden in my car. I'd already transferred copies of all the evidence to Jessica and Daniel, with instructions to go to the FBI if anything happened to me. Marcus came home late, his face grim. We need to talk, he said. Of course. What about, I think we should take a drive, clear our heads, talk about our future. In my previous life, this was how it had started. A suggestion for a drive to talk things through that ended with sabotaged brakes and a crash that looked like an accident. That sounds nice, I said, my heart pounding. Should I drive? You look exhausted. No, Marcus said quickly. I'll drive. I know a nice spot overlooking the sound. Very peaceful. I followed him to the garage, where he was already warming up his BMW, the same car from my nightmares, with brakes that had likely been tampered with hours ago. Actually, I said, stopping at the passenger door, I just remembered, I left something inside. Give me 1 second. Before Marcus could object, I hurried back into the house and grabbed my phone. With trembling fingers, I sent a pre-written text to Daniel. It's happening now. BMW license plate, 7G4N2P. Following the route to Deception Pass, then I returned to the car, where Marcus was waiting with barely concealed impatience. Ready? He asked. Ready, I replied, clicking my seatbelt and trying to look calm while my pulse raced. As we pulled out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of another car starting its engine down the street. Daniel, right on schedule. This time, Marcus Blackwell wouldn't be the only one with a plan. The drive to Deception Pass took 45 minutes, 45 minutes of Marcus making small talk while planning my death, and me responding normally while knowing exactly how this was supposed to end. The winding mountain road that led to the scenic overlook was the same route where I'd died in my previous life. My car plunging through the guardrail into the rocky gorge below. Remember our first date? Marcus asked, as we climbed higher into the mountains. I brought you up here to watch the sunset. Of course I remember, I replied, watching his hands grip the steering wheel. You said you wanted to show me the most beautiful view in Washington. What he'd actually said was that he wanted to share something special with me, somewhere we could be alone. Back then, it had been romantic. Now, with the knowledge of what he'd become, those same words felt sinister. My phone buzzed with a text. Marcus glanced over as I checked it. Just Jessica asking about lunch next week. I lied. The message was actually from Daniel. In position, emergency services on standby. You've been spending a lot of time with Jessica lately, Marcus observed. She's helping me with something, I said truthfully. Oh? What kind of something? This was it, the moment to reveal my hand. In my previous life, I'd never gotten the chance to confront him about his betrayal. This time, I wouldn't die wondering if he'd ever felt guilty. Divorce papers, I said calmly. Marcus's foot slammed on the brake pedal, and the car lurched to a stop on the narrow shoulder. Exactly as I'd expected, he'd forgotten about his sabotage in the shock of my revelation. What did you say? His voice was barely a whisper. I said divorce papers. I know about Victoria, Marcus. I know about the baby, the apartment, the money you've been stealing. I know about everything. His face went through a series of expressions: shock, fear, calculation, and finally, cold resolve. You don't know anything, he said, reaching for the ignition. You're imagining things. But when he turned the key, nothing happened. I smiled as recognition dawned in his eyes. Looking for this? I held up a small device, the car's starter relay, which I'd removed while pretending to grab my phone from the house. How did you? I also know about Dr. Harrison, I continued. I know he didn't save my life during emergency surgery. I know he sterilized me on your orders so Victoria's baby would be your only heir. Marcus stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. In a way, he was. That's impossible. You were unconscious. There's no way you could know. I heard every word. I lied smoothly. I woke up during the procedure. Imagine my surprise, listening to my husband and my doctor discuss making me infertile to protect his mistress. The color drained from his face. Claire, I can explain. Can you explain the $2 million you embezzled? Can you explain why you put a down payment on a house in Victoria's name? Can you explain why you sabotaged the brakes on this car? His eyes darted to the brake pedal, then back to me. We both knew what that meant. You're insane, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Then why don't you try the brakes? For a long moment, we sat in silence on the dark mountain road. Finally, Marcus laughed, a bitter, defeated sound. You always were smarter than I gave you credit for, he said. So what now? You turn me in? Destroy everything my family built. Your family built Blackwell Industries on integrity, I replied. You destroyed it the moment you started stealing from it. For Victoria, he exploded. Everything I did was for her. She needed money for the gallery, for the baby. I was going to pay it all back after the Morrison deal. With money you'd never have earned honestly. Face it, Marcus. You're not half the man your father was. That hit home. Marcus's greatest fear had always been living up to his father's legacy. Knowing he'd failed completely broke something inside him. So what happens now? He asked quietly. I pulled out my phone and showed him a video. Security footage of him entering Victoria's apartment building the night before. Now you're going to call Victoria and Dr. Harrison and tell them to meet us at the police station, I said. You're going to confess to everything. The embezzlement, the medical malpractice, the attempted murder, all of it. And if I refuse, then this footage goes to Detective Rivera, along with all the financial records Daniel Cross obtained, Jessica's legal analysis of your crimes, and my testimony about what you've done. Victoria loses her baby's father to prison, and you lose any chance of making this right. Marcus stared at the phone for a long moment. You hired Daniel Cross, the FBI guy? Among others. Did you really think I'd face you alone? As if on cue, headlights appeared in the distance. Daniel's car pulled up behind us, followed by a police cruiser I hadn't expected. Insurance, I explained as officers approached our car. I wasn't sure you'd come quietly. Detective Rivera, a woman in her 40s with sharp brown eyes, tapped on Marcus's window. He rolled it down slowly. Mr. Blackwell? I'm Detective Rivera. We need to have a conversation about some financial irregularities at your company. What irregularities? Marcus asked, still trying to bluff. Rivera held up a folder thick with documents: embezzlement, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit medical malpractice. We have enough evidence to arrest you right now, but your wife suggested you might want to cooperate. Marcus looked at me with something that might have been respectful. You planned all of this. I learned from the best, I replied. You taught me that people will do anything when they're desperate. The difference is, I was fighting for justice, not greed. 2 hours later, we sat in an interrogation room at the Seattle Police Department. Marcus had called his lawyer, but it was too late. Daniel's evidence was overwhelming, and Rivera had been building a case for weeks based on the information I'd provided. Victoria arrived in tears, her pregnancy just beginning to show. She looked between Marcus and me with confusion and growing horror as the full scope of their crimes became clear. You said the money was from bonuses, she whispered to Marcus. You said Claire agreed to the medical procedure. I was protecting our future, Marcus replied weakly. By destroying an innocent woman's life? Victoria turned to me, her face crumpling. Claire, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. About the money. Maybe not. But you knew he was married when you started sleeping with him, I said coldly. You knew what kind of man he was. Dr. Harrison was the last to arrive, accompanied by his own lawyer. The weight of losing his medical license and facing criminal charges had aged him visibly. Marcus convinced me it was for the best, he said during his confession. He said you both had agreed that there were genetic issues that made pregnancy dangerous, and you didn't think to get my consent in writing, I asked, or to consult with other doctors. Harrison had no answer for that. By dawn, all three of them had been arrested. Marcus faced 20 years for embezzlement and conspiracy. Dr. Harrison would likely never practice medicine again. Victoria, pregnant and alone, broke down completely when she realized her baby's father would be in prison for most of its childhood. I felt no pity for any of them. 6 months later, I sat in Jessica's office, signing the final divorce papers. Marcus had tried to contest the settlement from his jail cell, but with his crimes exposed, he had no leverage. The judge awarded you 80% of the marital assets, Jessica reported, plus damages from the medical malpractice suit against Dr. Harrison. You're looking at about $15 million after legal fees, more money than I'd ever dreamed of having. But that wasn't the real victory. There's something else, Jessica continued, sliding another document across the desk. I got a call from Dr. Sarah Chen at Seattle Fertility Institute. She reviewed your medical records and believes the damage from Harrison's procedure might be reversible with advanced surgery. My heart stopped. What are you saying? She's saying you might still be able to have children. It would require multiple procedures and there are no guarantees, but it's possible. For the first time since my rebirth, I cried. Not from grief or anger but from hope. 8 months later, I held my daughter Emma in my arms, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine as she slept peacefully in her nursery. The fertility treatments had worked on the first try, as if the universe was finally balancing the scales. Marcus would spend the next 15 years in prison, watching his biological daughter grow up through supervised visits, while knowing he'd destroyed his chance at a real family. Victoria had lost her gallery, her reputation, and any hope of the wealthy lifestyle she'd schemed to obtain. But I had everything I'd ever wanted, my health restored, my future secured, and most importantly, the family that Marcus had tried to steal from me. As I rocked Emma to sleep, I whispered the words I'd dreamed of saying since the day I woke up with my memories intact. Mommy's here, sweetheart. And no one will ever take you away from me. The man who'd made me infertile to protect his lover had lost everything, while I'd gained the one thing that mattered most. In the end, justice wasn't just served, it was perfectly, poetically complete. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now, and hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.